Thank you all for tuning in today's webinar about our draft new planning scheme. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that this session is being recorded. This recording will only capture our presentation material and myself. Your faces, names, and other details will not be shown, and your privacy will be protected. We'll be posting this onto our website this week, so you'll be able to revisit any of the content covered today. Before we begin, I'd like to start by respectfully acknowledging the traditional owners as custodians of the land and waters we share. We pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging as the keepers of our traditions, customs, cultures, and stories of proud peoples. Council is seeking feedback on its draft planning scheme. The purpose of this session is to provide more information on how the draft new planning scheme aims to protect, rehabilitate, and enhance our natural environments and biodiversity. We'll address how this applies to the city and to your property and show you where you can find more information. We'll also walk through the process of making a formal submission on the planning scheme so you can provide your feedback or raise other factors the council should consider. Today's session is about providing general information, so we won't be able to answer all of the questions about the draft planning scheme or specific properties. However, our team will note any of the questions asked today and will come back to you with considered responses. The planning scheme acts as a blueprint for planning and development in our city. It guides the way new developments should occur while balancing growth and change with the protection of what matters most. The planning scheme achieves this by planning for and regulating what development of land, buildings should occur, where and when, how development should occur, and what assessment process is required. Council has drafted a new planning scheme that will set out a vision for the next 20 years of our city, centred around the following themes: great places, infrastructure, housing, resilient communities, open space and environment, transport and movement, employment and economy, heritage and cultural values. Today we'll be focusing on the theme of open space and environment and the role of the theme in protecting and enhancing our diverse and unique green spaces, landscapes, waterways and wildlife, ensuring that our environment is valued and protected, and the health and resilience of our biodiversity is maintained or enhanced to support ecological processes, and balancing growth and change in a long-term sustainable approach that contributes to a resilient natural environment and intergenerational equity. The open space and environment theme is woven throughout our draft new planning scheme. However, it is most notably addressed in the strategic framework, which sets out the guiding overarching strategic and policy direction for natural places, through the assessment benchmarks in our 30 local frameworks, providing consideration for our natural places at a local area scale and addressing unique needs and characteristics for each particular community of interest. Also through the two environmental zones, the conservation zone and the environmental management zone, which promote the protection of environmental sensitive areas. And lastly, the overlay mapping and code specifically. These are the focus of today's session, so let's dive in for further detail. The draft new planning scheme proposes two new overlays, one for biodiversity and another for waterway corridors and wetlands. In general, planning overlays are shown as online maps with layers that display additional planning considerations that may be applicable when proposing development on a property. They have a range of purposes and may show land that is sensitive to development or areas that provide opportunities or constraints. In addition to this mapping, these new overlays are supported by codes that guide and set specific requirements and criteria for how a property can be used or developed. These requirements aim to help us enhance our natural environments and protect them for the future. It is important to always consider overlays alongside zones in the early stages of designing a development. Overlays show you the development opportunities and constraints you need to consider, while zoning, mapping and codes outline the types of activities and developments that you expect for your area. Together, both zones and overlays play an important role in determining whether a proposed development is appropriate for a location and if a development application will be required. Overlays are mapped using the most relevant information available, which may be held by council or state government. Specific studies either undertaken or commissioned by council also contribute to the formulation of overlays, such as the biodiversity studies. With the introduction of the new environment overlays, there will be some changes to where and how certain developments happen. It's important to note that while the existing lawful use of a property won't change, the overlays may potentially apply to new developments. For example, developments which involve damage or removal of native vegetation and major changes to existing development. So the biodiversity overlay identifies matters of both local and state environmental significance. Matters of local environmental significance, also known as MLES for short, are natural areas identified by council in the planning scheme as having values that are important specifically to our local government area. It is important to mention that matters of local environmental significance cannot be the same species identified as having significance at a state or national level, such as the koala, for example. There are over 2,000 recorded native flora and fauna species in Ipswich, including several rare and threatened species. For this first iteration of our mapping, we have identified 26 of those species as MLES. The mapping considers flora along with factors relevant to our fauna, such as habitat characteristics, food sources, and movement corridors. State government recognises a further 30 significant species that occur in Ipswich, known as matters of state environmental significance, or MSES. The state government mapping is included for information-only purposes, and further information on MSES can be found by accessing the State Planning Policy Interactive Mapping System at the website shown on the screen. Then selecting the State Planning Policy Interactive Mapping System and clicking the prompts through to their mapping page. The overlay also includes strategic corridor links, shown as arrows in the mapping, which are intended to conserve and improve the connectivity and resilience of our natural landscapes. These corridors are currently identified for strategic purposes at this time and are based on regional biodiversity corridor mapping in the South East Queensland Regional Plan and in Council's Natural Environment Strategy, with further work proposed in the future to prepare more refined corridor mapping and identify linkage opportunities. While the biodiversity overlay is proposed to apply to natural environments across Ipswich, it will have the biggest effect on areas with significant native natural features and vegetation. If you make a development application in an area affected by the biodiversity mapping, you may need to respond to the requirements in the biodiversity overlay code. The code details requirements for protecting existing environmental matters, rehabilitating degraded ecosystems, the design and layout of developments, and environmental offset requirements. As part of meeting these requirements, you may also need to provide a site-specific environmental assessment and management plan. However, there may also be some development scenarios where a development application may not be required. So moving on to the draft new waterway and wetlands overlay. This overlay is a substantial update and modernisation of the current planning scheme's designated watercourses. To properly protect our waterways, you also need to protect the landscape and vegetation that surround them. The purpose of the waterway corridors and wetlands overlay is to provide and maintain buffers to waterway corridors and wetlands, protect and enhance bank stability, in-stream waterway health and vegetation, riparian corridors, avoid development that encroaches on the areas mapped in the overlay, better connect our ecosystem and native vegetation and riparian areas. To achieve this purpose, mapping identifies wetlands and wetland buffers, minor waterways and buffers, medium waterways and buffers, major waterways and buffers. So how could this impact you? The overlay will have the biggest effect on the areas close to our rivers and creeks. For example, the Brisbane River, Bremer River, 6 Mile Creek and Goodna Creek. The requirements outlined in the waterway corridors and wetlands overlay code only need to be considered in specific circumstances. Application of this overlay is generally triggered when development proposes to interfere or remove native vegetation within a buffer area, or new lot boundaries or infrastructure is proposed within a buffer area. In those cases, you may need an environmental assessment report to demonstrate that the proposed development does not negatively impact the waterway, riparian corridor, or in-stream waterway health, with environment offsetting not considered an appropriate means to considering these impacts. You can use our website to view the zones and overlays that apply to a property and the wider Ipswich area and read the new planning scheme. I encourage you to join me now as I take you through the process. First, head to shapeyouripswich.com.au, new Ipswich planning scheme. Scroll down the page until you see View the Draft Planning Scheme and Mapping. Select this to be taken to the Draft Ipswich Plan 2024 page. Now you're ready to search for your property. Once you type in your address, it will show above the search bar as an option to select. On the left-hand side of the page, you can view information about your property, including the zones and overlays that apply. For example, this property is in the Principal Centre zone. You can use the checkboxes to select or unselect any mapping layer. Below the zone, there's also a link to view the relevant section of the planning scheme. Selecting this will take you to the section of the zone code so you can read more about its purpose and how it applies to development. Hit the back button on your browser to return to the planning scheme mapping. You can select mapping tools on the right-hand side of the page to view the different zones and overlays where they apply across Ipswich. Underneath this is the legend, which shows what each of the property layers look like. This helps you to easily see what different layers apply across the map. For a PDF report of this information, select View Property Report on the left-hand side of the page. We encourage everyone to provide their feedback on the draft new planning scheme. The best way to do this is by making a formal submission. Your submission can voice support, raise concerns, or provide suggestions for all or part of the proposed planning scheme and mapping. To make it count, Council must receive your submission before consultation closes on Sunday, the 16th of July, 2023. The easiest way to make a submission is online through shapeyouripswich.com.au, but you can also lodge your submission by post, in person, or via email. To make your submission online, head to the shapeyouripswich.com.au and select the new Ipswich Planning Scheme project. Scroll down the page until you see the Make a Submission button. Select this to be taken to the submission page, which includes a template that you can fill out. Before you begin, we recommend reading the How to Make a Submission fact sheet. We've included a link to this on our page. If your submission relates to a specific property, make sure you enter the street address or lot. Next, select any topics or parts of the planning scheme that your submission relates to. Now you can provide your written submission. Make sure you include any supporting grounds, facts, or circumstances. You can also attach any relevant supporting materials. Before submitting, we'll ask you to tell us a bit more about yourself and provide some contact details. You'll receive an acknowledgement of your submission, and once all submissions have been reviewed, we'll also get back to you to let you know how your feedback has been considered alongside all other submissions received. Now you're ready to submit. Thank you for taking the time to tune in today and learn more about the draft new Ipswich Planning Scheme. This is our second of 3 webinar sessions we're holding. We're also running drop-in sessions at libraries across Ipswich. You can use this as an opportunity to talk one-on-one with one of our planners and better understand how the new planning scheme might affect your property and area. You will also be able to find a recording of this webinar and our first webinar, which provides an introduction to the draft planning scheme on shapeyouripswich.com.au this week. For anyone who shared specific questions about your situation or property when registering for the session or in the chat today, our team will be reaching out to you via email with a response. You can also reach out to our planning team anytime during consultation to ask questions or have a chat about the planning scheme. You can contact us over the phone, by email, or in writing. Thank you for tuning in to learn more about the planning scheme and our environment and open space.